Conflicting reports about the negotiation status of Baker Mayfield's contract. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every single day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs. Credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers as deputy editor of SB Nation's BucsNation.com. Here with you every Monday through Friday, along with our everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, plus one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Head to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs to become an insider today. Could a former Tampa Bay Buc be pushing for a reunion, and which remaining Bucs free agents should they bring back? That is coming up a little later on Locked On Bucs. But let's start with the news that came out yesterday, and I talked about it a little bit on the live show regarding Baker Mayfield and his contract negotiations with the Buccaneers. So, So, on yesterday's episode, I mentioned a report from Pewter Report's Scott Reynolds that Baker Mayfield and the Bucs were about $20 million apart in their negotiations. Reynolds reported that Baker's camp was looking for $44 million a year, while the Bucs were offering in the neighborhood of $25 million a year. Well, Rick Stroud of the Tampa Bay Times said on his Good Day Tampa Bay podcast that he was told by people on both sides of the table that isn't true, and Stroud's not sure where those numbers came from. Stroud also mentioned speaking with Mayfield's agent at the Pro Bowl, as well as Mayfield telling the media about the quote-unquote sacrifices that guys were going to have to make financially in order to bring everybody back and try to go on another run. Now, I want to be very clear about this. Sorry, I needed to get a message in there to Ben that I started typing during the intro, and it was going to bother me if I didn't go ahead and get that done. But I want to be clear about this first and foremost. I am not saying that either one of these guys is right, and I am not saying that either one of these guys is wrong. That is not the point I am trying to get across here. The funny thing about this business is that we all get information from different places and different people, and sometimes it turns out to be true, sometimes it doesn't. I have been personally on both sides before. I had been told that I was wrong when I said that Dirk Cutter was going to accept the Bucs offensive coordinator job years and years ago, and I was told I was wrong when I said that Gerald McCoy was going to be cut from the Buccaneers. I believe that was 2019. And then I was vehemently told that the Buccaneers were not getting new uniforms just to have it announced that they were. So I have been on both sides of this spectrum, and it happens. It's part of the business. The thing is, you can't determine whether or not your source or sources are giving you the right information, just that they're telling you what they personally know. Sometimes they're in the know, sometimes they aren't. But obviously, they're your source for a reason, and you trust them the same way they trust you. That's why people don't reveal their sources. And I realize that this seems to be a punchline among a lot of fans on social media that think all sources are fake and the information's being made up. And they always say, tell us who your source is. That's not how those relationships work. Those relationships are built strictly on trust, that the source has to trust that you're not going to reveal who they are, just like you're going to trust that the source is giving you the most accurate information possible, but nobody is right 100% of the time. Schefter's been wrong. Rappaport's been wrong. And those are two of the biggest insiders out there. It happens. Obviously, Scott is hearing things from people that he trusts, and he went public with that information that Baker wanted 44 million. The Bucs offered 25 million because he trusts that the information is true. From there, it's his job to pass that along to his readers. On the flip side, Stroud is not hearing the same things, and it's his responsibility to report what he is hearing. Regardless, whether the numbers they are hearing are the same or different, both of these guys have one thing in common, and that's that they are hearing that negotiations are ongoing and that the two sides want to get a deal done and just haven't been able to do that yet. I talked on this show yesterday about whether or not the Bucs should abandon the idea of Baker Mayfield in favor of Russell Wilson, and I made it very clear that I think that that's a bad idea, but some people are talking about why they believe it's a good idea. Something else I talked about on this show is that I don't know what the Bucs do if Baker is not their guy and if Baker doesn't come back. And I don't think that the options, the backup choices are great. However, Stroud believes that they have some interest in a quarterback in this year's class, something else that he talked about on his show. Stroud said on his podcast that the Bucs really like what they've seen from Tampa native Michael Penix Jr. and that he could be an option for Tampa in the first round if things don't get worked out with Mayfield. Now, Stroud also talked about that the Bucs believe in Kyle Trask and that he could wind up being the starter if Baker leaves, and that's something that they spoke with offensive coordinator candidates about. So Trask could end up being the starter whether they draft a quarterback or not. The Bucs reportedly love Penix's ability to throw an accurate deep ball, something that wasn't really there last year. And while he has dealt with 2 ACL surgeries and shoulder problems, all the medicals in Indianapolis checked out fine. Again, I've said my piece on this show about Penix. He has talent, but I don't think he has the it factor above the shoulders. He doesn't do well against pressure because he doesn't process what he's seeing fast enough. That was the most evident on the biggest stage that Penix had, and that was the national championship against Michigan. And Michigan was probably as close to an NFL caliber defense as you're going to see in college, and he got progressively worse throughout the night. Remember everyone making fun of Zach Wilson for quote unquote seeing ghosts? That was Penix against Michigan. Now, I'm not saying all of this because I think the Bucs are going to walk away from the Mayfield negotiations or anything like that. But I thought it was worth noting because, as I said to one of the insiders today when we were texting back and forth, the closer we get to that negotiation window on Monday, the more I'm going to start to come off of me saying that I was 99.9% sure that Baker was going to be the quarterback for the Buccaneers next season. I said that about a month ago. And I think it's still likely, just like I said on Monday's episode, that I felt that Evans returning was the most likely scenario, but you cannot rule out anything once other teams get involved. The Falcons could be in on him. The Patriots are interested. The Vikings are interested based on what happens with Kirk Cousins. And now the Broncos are potentially in the mix for a free agent quarterback. The Bucs need to do everything they can to get this wrapped up by the end of the weekend if they want to save themselves from having to open door number 2 or door number 3. So it doesn't matter if what Scott said or what Rick said aren't the same thing. What matters is the Bucs get this thing figured out with Baker Mayfield's camp and don't let him hit that open window on Monday. I'm going to go jump over to the live chat real quick. We got Paul, a.k.a. Florida Dream House, not Trask, dear God, no. On the flip side, we have, is it Caleb? Caleb Parker, Maine, says, yes, baby Trask. And then he says Trask looked amazing last year in preseason. We have Ben in the chat saying Evans would not re-sign with the Bucs if Baker wasn't returning. He'd definitely not re-sign knowing Trask might be the QB. I don't know if that's necessarily true. You did have the list of demands saying that he didn't want to play with a rookie quarterback. And if the Bucs go with Penix, that could ruffle some feathers. But Mike signed his deal because it was the best thing for Mike. And we know throughout his career, it doesn't matter who the quarterback is. It doesn't matter if it's Mike Glennon or Josh McCown or Jameis Winston or Ryan Fitzpatrick or Baker Mayfield or Tom Brady. Mike's going to get his. And he is going to make plays to ensure that he's doing everything he can to help the Buccaneers win games. Paul, a.k.a. Florida Dreamhouse, says Penix is an NFL bust waiting to happen. I agree with you. But you cannot underestimate the amount of talent that young man has. My concern when it comes to Penix is between the ears and whether or not he can learn how to process the information fast enough to become a viable starting NFL quarterback. Now, a former Buccaneer may be making a plea on social media to reunite with Todd Bowles and the Bucs defense this upcoming season. That is next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, brake kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. You shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. I love taking advantage of the flash deals when the event I'm going to gets closer, but there's no doubt that my favorite feature is the view from your seat, so I know exactly what I am paying for, and I'm not surprised when I get to the venue. All-in prices show your total up front, so you know you're getting a great deal before checkout, and buying tickets in seconds with just 2 taps is super convenient, and I love being able to use Apple Pay right there on the app to secure my seats. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find the tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time is going to credit you 110% of the difference. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every single day. Everydayers, make sure you are coming back tomorrow. Evan Klosky will be joining us to wrap up the week that was and look ahead to the Monday that will be when the negotiation window opens up. But in the meantime, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. I do see my son in the chat. Stop it, Jackson. Former Buccaneers safety Jordan Whitehead is set to hit free agency, and I've spoken about him since the season ended as being one of the players I would like to see the Buccaneers pursue in free agency. Well, maybe Jordan Whitehead is interested in that as well. So on Thursday, Whitehead spent a lot of time on Twitter, and his posts have been dedicated to his Buccaneers highlights. Now, you can look at that and you could say, well, of course, James, he's about to be a free agent, so he's posting highlights of his career so far to show what he can do for all interested parties. And I would agree. But then why are there so many videos from his time with the Bucs? He had highlights with the Jets too. So where are those videos? Here's the thing about Jordan Whitehead. He was at his best and utilized in a way that maximized his talents the most when he was with Todd Bowles in Tampa. Yes, he's coming off of a career high in interceptions with 4 last season, but 3 of those were in week 1 against the Buffalo Bills. He had more tackles for loss in the 2020 season with the Bucs than he had in his 2 years with the Jets combined. No forced fumbles with the Jets, no fumble recoveries with the Jets, only a half of a sack with the Jets. And I say all of this because it goes back to my original point. Todd Bowles knew how to best use Whitehead in his defense that allowed him to shine and be an impact player. Reuniting him with Winfield in the back end of that defense would be an instant massive upgrade over what they've had over the last 2 seasons. The Bucs have struggled at safety outside of Winfield since they lost Whitehead and Edwards. And of course, I mentioned Edwards as someone that I wouldn't mind the Bucs bringing back either. But what Whitehead would bring as a player in a return to Tampa can be used in similar ways as Winfield. You can put him in coverage. You can send him after the quarterback. He can crash the box in run defense. And I say similar because he can't do everything Antoine does in the same way. If he could, he would also be looking at a $20 million a year contract as well. Instead, he's coming off of a 1-year, $5.25 million deal, and the Bucs can probably get him for around $5.5 million a year to come back. You're probably looking at around a 2, maybe even a 3-year deal, which would put him in his age 28 or 29 season when he would hit free agency again and be able to cash in one more time, especially if he's highlighted the way we know Bowles can highlight him. Now, you have your 2 starting safeties locked and loaded, and you can look to the discount free agent bin after the draft, or you can use a day 3 pick on a guy that you can coach up and develop as a backup behind Winfield and Whitehead. You don't have to plug and play them immediately. You don't have to break the bank for them. And on top of that, with all the safeties that have been released right before the start of free agency that are going to command big money, you could wind up with a hugely impactful player for pennies compared to guys like Justin Simmons and Jordan Poyer, Jamal Adams, Kevin Byard, Quandre Diggs, among others, who are all about to rake in mega deals. I am going to get into my top 5 offensive and top 5 defensive free agents I think the Buccaneers should pursue on Monday's open negotiating window primer. But I thought this was certainly something worth talking about given the state of Whitehead's Twitter account on Thursday and the fact that you all already know he is going to be on my list of free agents that the Buccaneers should pursue because I have talked about him and I've talked about Mike Edwards coming back to the Bucs on this show since the season ended. So real quick, going to jump into the chat before we hit that last break. I hope my son is done blowing up the chat talking about how hungry he is. David in the chat says, I sent James a Jordan Whitehead story for Instagram last month. He was posting pics from the Super Bowl. Timothy says, Winfield Whitehead combo is lethal. Just need to solidify the pass rush. David also says, nice mic, by the way. It sounds crispy. I'm glad to hear that, considering all the problems that I was having last week with my old microphone. I got this one in as fast as I could, so it was ready to roll for this week. But appreciate hearing that the sound is coming through quite well. Scotty J, he and I we were chatting on the Insider's text earlier. He says, Baker has found a home. I hope you're right, but I'm not going to rule out that he may be moving on. That is the risk you take the longer this drags on. But I do think that Baker wants to be in Tampa. The Bucs want to be in, or the Bucs want Baker in Tampa. We know those two things are factual information. I just hope they're able to figure it out, come together, and get this thing done sooner rather than later. So I did a lot of Bucs pending free agent profiles, talking about who I think should come back, who I think won't come back, but there are still more pending free agents that the Bucs have, and we are going to dive into those coming up next here on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024 validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer.
Wrapping things up here on a Thursday episode of Locked On Bucs, and the Bucs can't bring everyone back that they have hitting free agency, nor do they want to. And I've talked about some of the bigger names in our pending free agent series as far as who the Bucs should look at re-signing, who they shouldn't. And I've spoken numerous times about letting Devin White walk, which is exactly what they're going to do. But I also said they absolutely need to bring back Baker and Levante David and Chase McLaughlin. I would like to see them bring back Aaron Stinney and Greg Gaines as depth or rotational pieces. And I think the door should be open to bring back Chase Edmonds, but I don't think it's vital if they see a different free agent that they want to bring in and pair with a draft pick to round out the running back room. But that leaves these pending free agents for the Bucs that I have not talked about on this show. And I'm going to rattle off all of these names pretty quickly and then dive in. William Golston, Matt Filer, Ryan Neal, Zach Triner, D. Delaney, Cam Gill, Nick Leverett, Justin School, and David Wells. Guys, I think that they should and will bring back William Golston, Zach Triner, D. Delaney, and Nick Leverett. So Golston is the longest tenured Buck as of last season when he returned. And while he doesn't ever have those eye-popping stats, he's a reliable rotational guy that's phenomenal in run defense. Something that the Bucs hang their hat on is their ability to shut down the run and make teams one-dimensional. I think it would be great to have him back. I don't think it will be expensive. And if he wants to continue playing at age 33, I think that he would want to return to Tampa. I don't think in the final year or the final 2 years of his career, he's going to want to uproot and move after being in Tampa for so long. So I think that's kind of a match that you can even put on the back burner and you could probably get done after the draft. Zach Triner has been great. And while he is 33, good long snappers don't grow on trees. So if you can keep one as good as Zach is, you do it. D. Delaney, I think, returns as a depth and rotational guy, a special teams guy. He isn't going to get a mega deal or anything like that in free agency, and Bowles loves his versatility. He has gotten plenty of opportunities over the years in Tampa, and when he does get those opportunities, he makes the most of them. So I do think that he is back as well. Then Leverett, again, good, cheap depth along the offensive line. Some guys that may be back, but it's not the end of the world if they aren't, would be Cam Gill and Justin School. Gill is more of a special teams guy, but again, reliable depth at a reasonable price. You still have to work out things with Levante David. Not sure who the other starter is going to be, whether it's going to be KJ Britt or you're going to have Servassier Dennis, or maybe a player that's not even on the roster yet. But Cam Gill is a guy that you can keep, you can trust if you have to put him on the field. School, again, is going to be super cheap, but also someone that they could replace either in the draft or maybe undrafted free agency. He's not a guy that if he leaves, you're going to go, oh no, what are the Bucs doing? And then finally, in the best of luck in your future endeavors category, Ryan Neal, David Wells, and Matt Filer. Ryan Neal was terrible. And if the Bucs bring him back, they'll get exactly what they deserve for such a bad decision. And that is going to be blown coverages, blown plays, explosive touchdowns allowed, missed cover, missed tackles, missed everything. Do not bring back Ryan Neal. I have nothing against him as a human being. I'm sure he is wonderfully kind and nice. I have never had the opportunity to speak with him. But if you have the opportunity to bring back Jordan Whitehead, like we just talked about, or you can bring back Mike Edwards, or you can bring in quite literally any other living, breathing body to replace Ryan Neal, go ahead and do it. I mean, at this point, I would bring back Chris Conte. Bring back Chris Conte over Ryan Neal. That's how bad things were. Filer, he wasn't bad, but he wasn't really good either. He did lose his starting job to Aaron Stinney, who also was not bad, but also wasn't really good either. And I think he's going to look for an opportunity to at least compete for a starting job somewhere else. I don't think that's something he would get in Tampa. The Bucs are better off drafting a new guard or potentially a center and moving Robert Hainsey over and letting Filer move on. Wells, the fourth tight end. There are other options out there for guys that could come in and replace him and do it for cheap. Again, you could look at a guy like Bryson Hopkins, who played for Liam Cohen in Los Angeles. That is going to cost you about the same as David Wells would. And he would likely see the field more often than Wells would. You have Kate Otten, you have Payne Durham, you have Ko Kieft. Wells moving on is not going to hurt the Bucs. Again, I do want to let you know that coming up on Monday, I will be giving you my top 5 offensive free agents and my top 5 defensive free agents that the Buccaneers should be interested in as a primer for that open negotiating window to begin. No, these top 5 lists do not mean that I think the Bucs are going to be in on all of these guys or that they'll even sign, a third of these guys. But these are players that I feel will be affordable for Tampa and that could come in and make an impact this season. So be sure to be on the lookout for that on Monday. Coming up tomorrow, I am going to be joined by Evan Klosky. As I mentioned, we got that schedule worked out. He's going to talk about the week that was and what he expects to happen when the open negotiating window begins on Monday. Going to hit the chat one more time before I get out of here. Scotty J says Greg Gaines is a no-brainer. I don't know if he's a no-brainer, but I liked his fit. I like having him come back for a second year in bowl system. I like the reliability that he offers in a rotational role. But again, that's not production that you probably can't find somewhere else. But I would rather bring back the guy that's already familiar with the defense. And you could probably expect the numbers to be a little bit better this year than they were last year. Scotty J also says Gill depth at linebacker. Yeah, and that's the biggest thing. But again, we don't know what the Bucs' plan is to replace Devin White. Do they feel they have a starter in-house in either Britt or Dennis, or is that going to be one of those positions that they address coming up in the draft? Or is there going to be an inside linebacker on my list that I think the Bucs could and will pursue? We'll see on Monday. Demon Hunter says, could you imagine pairing Antoine Winfield Jr. and Jordan with Yaya and Kalijah and Vea and picking up Chop in the draft? Oh, that would be so much fun. I would have a great time covering that team with that defense. And then Demon Hunter says, please do not bring back Chris Conte. Yeah, I mean, they won't, because he's like 40 some years old now. But if they did bring back Chris Conte, could it get any worse than it was with Ryan Neal last year? I think it could not. So that is going to do it for this episode. I will be here with Evan Klosky to wrap up your week tomorrow. That episode will be recorded Thursday night. So if news breaks Friday morning, please don't freak out in the YouTube comments that something happened that we didn't talk about. That's what happens when you record these shows the night before. Things happen. I can't control that. But Evan will be on to give his thoughts on Mike Evans, on Baker Mayfield, and what he expects to happen on Monday. In the meantime, please check out everything going on over at BucsNation.com. Follow along on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at j_Yarcho_Bucs. Become an insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs. Subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.